fire prevention. But none of this really bears on the structure. And a couple of ground rules tonight. We're not talking about vegetation at all. That will be discussed at the next meeting. And by the way, the next meeting here is March 8th, where we'll talk about the non-ignition zone, and that's where the close-in vegetation will be included. And then the following meeting is May 10th, and that will be about preparation within the house and evacuation. Little reminders like close your skylights, close your garage door, things we need to think about. And July 12th, I'm not quite sure yet, we will probably have tips regarding sensible defensible space. And the North Hills Community Association has paid for the hall, which I was able to get a reduction of $150 a night, so we don't have to pass the hat tonight. Leroy Griffin, the Assistant Fire Marshal, will do a short presentation after my introduction. And then the handout I gave you, it was as far as I could come up, what the issues are about protecting against embers. And this way it's blank and you can make your own notes on it as you like. This is being recorded for educational purposes, double both video and a backup tape recorder. Barbara Goldenberg next to me is also has been on the Wildfire Advisory Committee. She went to the National Wildlands Urban Interface meeting in, where was yours? Florida in 2008. I went to the meeting in Denver in 2006, which was just incredible. And both of these meetings really emphasize the importance of what the homeowner can do themselves. So let me launch into this. I'd like to first quote a story. In 1993, a wildfire in a dry canyon north of Laguna Beach, California, raced towards hundreds of nearby homes, giving residents little advance warning of its awesome destruction. More than 14,000 acres and 440 homes went up in flames. In the nearby Mystic Hills neighborhood, 286 homes were totally destroyed. Yet, there was one white house left standing in the midst of hundreds of piles of smoking ash that remained of its neighboring homes. This sole surviving house was built with fire prevention in mind. It stood as an example of how homes can, with a little extra attention, better withstand nature's perils. The practical methods used in and around that house can help reduce the chances of future wildfires from reducing communities to ashes. And that's what we're all about tonight. We want to make this one rare exception to survival a more common occurrence in the future. Briefly, wildfire threatens our homes in three ways. One is direct contact by flames. But this is not usually what starts them on fire. Next is radiated heat, where it's just the house heating up with no flame. And the radiated heat can easily cross the 10 feet that's common in our area with no vegetation whatsoever in between. It can even light up something 100 feet away, possibly. Third, flying embers in advance of the fire front. And these can be carried even a mile, especially the winds we have up here and have had the last few days. And more homes burn due to flying embers than for any other reason. Hence the subject tonight. The first house to burn showers its neighbors with embers more than any tree does. So we need to deny firebrands the fuel they need to cause trouble. Don't choose to be a victim, act before the fire approaches. And a few paragraphs here, and then Leroy will kick in. Journalists have described wildfires as attacking our homes like the direct fiery breath of a dragon, a rolling wall of fire that ignites everything in its path directly. They are wrong. Wildfires attack with a blizzard of firebrands, sending paratroopers well behind the lines. And understanding this has major implications about how we can prevent our homes from burning. And this is something we have to do ourselves. Studies of wildland-urban interface fires have shown the most interesting phenomenon. Now this comes from from a study presented at that 2006 meeting. I just barely made it tonight on kindness, so I'll sip on all. In the pine forest north of northwest Montana near Kalispell, isolated homes surrounded by trees caught fire well in advance of the fire front before the trees immediately surrounded them ignited. In Southern California, a string of houses lining a street burned to the ground across a river from a massive fire front, but the trees between the river and the homes never burned. Some of the trees were ignited by the houses, not the homes by the trees. In massive grass fires in Texas prairies, where there are few trees or even shrubs, homes made of concrete blocks and metal roofs nonetheless burst into flames, for reasons you will see. So why does this occur? And the answer is suggested, I had the good fortune of seeing Frank Beale's lectures at movies a couple of times, and his walk-arounds. He's retired now. He had a photograph of a trampoline that survived the Southern California fires in 2003. And when he looked at that trampoline, it looked like the Milky Way. There were uncountable burns of many sizes, all caused by flying embers. Literally a firestorm of embers. And the fire brands, again, blow well in advance of the fire, and they lodge in vulnerable places in the exterior of the houses and start them on fire. In other words, a home could be 300 feet with a cement fire break around it. When our winds get going, it can still be at risk. Not to say that what's in between doesn't count. They find the weakest link, and they also tend to smolder before bursting into flame, emphasizing the point that one cannot assume a house has not been ignited just because it has not yet burst into flame. And I think Barbara has some examples of the Laura fire. She can talk to this.
They talked several times about how both in New Mexico and Southern California, they go through and up the streets and put out all the burning things and keep moving on. And 5 hours after the fire front came through, the trees or the houses across the street, a house here, a house there, a house there would burst into flames because the embers had been either under the roof, under the decks, or wherever, smoldering away, and until they built up enough. Many of these houses look like they start on fire from the inside out. And that's what they've learned since our fire. You know, watching what's happened in Southern California, the fire science people have really done huge, huge research into which house burned when, and they see it going this one, and then this one, and then these two. They know a lot more than we did after the 91 fire, where the assumptions were that, you know, went house to house, and went house to tree to tree to tree to house. And we know more now.
Okay, so one further observation, we'll get to Leroy's talk shortly. Forest fires typically fight a fire by setting up a fire line well in advance of a fire and use a variety of techniques, including backfire. We can't do that. What's really not even an interface, it's an intermix in our area. Urban fires typically surround the fire and douse it with abundant water from a nearby fire hydrant. In the Oakland Hills, these options are clearly compromised. The wind is blowing, as we had earlier tonight, easily a gust of 30, and we frequently clock gusts as high as 80 miles per hour on an ex-firefighter has altimeter on top of his house, just up this hill. So how does this relate to Oakland? It mainly has to do with we have to educate ourselves about how to prepare our homes in advance by making them as ember-proof as possible so that the homes themselves can withstand the inevitable onslaught of fires on their own in the absence of the homeowner and without the help of firefighters. This is the reality. In order to do this, we need to think in terms of ignition zones, starting with the exterior of the house and working outwards. Zone 1, which we're addressing tonight, is the house itself, making it invulnerable to ember roofs. We can't fireproof it. No one would live in a fireproof house, but we can make it fire safe. Number 2, March 8th, creating a 5-foot non-ignition zone immediately surrounding the home. Vegetation issues will come in on that. Zone 3 is creating a fire-safe low ignition zone at least 30 feet from the house, and that will be the July 12th meeting. There's March 8th, May 10th, July 12th, they're all the second Thursdays of the odd months. It's not what your fire department can do for you, it's what only you can do for yourself and for your neighbors. I think I've talked enough, so Leroy, would you like to take the floor?
I'm not perfectly focused.
Right?
You went a little past the perfect focus there.
Tell me,
Okay.
try focus a little bit. See what's better.
That's better, that's
Better? I don't need this. Oh, Councilman. Good evening.
Yeah, we can hear.
Thanks for coming out. I'm Leroy Griffin, Assistant Fire Marshal of the Oakland Fire Department, close to 19 years. Education management is very important. Louder. I guess that. Vegetation management is a critical piece in our fire protection strategy for the East Bay Hills. History has shown that we have fires in the East Bay Hills. And I'm going to show you some slides from previous fires. That's what it looks like now. This is how it gets started. You see up in the upper left-hand corner, a structure fire. There's a misconception that fires only occur in the wildland setting. Most of the fires that occur in the wildland setting occur from structures, man-made activities, vehicle accidents, car fires will start a source of ignition. The problem is, where we live, here in the hills, we get the Diablo winds. I'm going to be honest with you. Under certain conditions, the fire department is at odds with trying to put out fire. So ignition proofing your home, protecting your home, it's just like a burglar. Protecting your home is your first strategy, because in fighting fires, under Diablo wind conditions, we talked about embers. Those are the conditions. That's one firefighter off a truck. Those embers are traveling faster than we could go. I have been on several fires where we went through a neighborhood and there was no fire, only to come back and see the entire neighborhood burn. So after several fires down south and ours, we started doing some code interpretations, changing. How can we protect the structures? You see that picture? The tree is still up. The house is burning from interior. What Boss Eagle was talking about, closing, protecting your home using fire safe practices, non-flammable. The stuff inside your house is more flammable than the stuff that's outside your house. And once a structure is ignited, then the fire becomes unmanageable for us. We looked at the code development. We said, okay, that house is completely gone. But if we look at the house on the far left, what's burning? The roof. Ignitability, protecting your home from ember penetration. The last thing you want to see over the hills is that. Why? Because we're retreating. We cannot control the fire. Or that. What we're doing right now in this kind of operation is we're trying to put a barrier to protect the homes that haven't been burned. Those that are behind the fire lost. You look at that picture, you get an entire block that was burned. Well, why did that house survive? That's what the question we asked in the code. What did they do differently than the rest of the structures? Same here. Look at the roof. Roof is a Class A roof. How the house is structured. Every house burned, and in synopsis of this fire investigation, it started from one house, radiant heat going from the second house to the third house to the fourth house. Houses that were properly protected, timber protection, proper window protection. Something as simple as when you hear the siren asking you to either shelter in place or evacuate, before you step out, you can protect your house by closing the drapes, making sure the garage doors down, taking stuff off your deck. Very, very, very little tips and tidbits you could use to protect your house. So, like all the bureaucrats, we created laws. This area of California, after the wildfires, defined areas as high fire hazard areas. Those areas, in a high fire hazard area, are required to have certain requirements. The inspection program that we enforce, which I'm going to talk about. Building for new structures and modification structures, requiring Class A roofs, double pane glass in new structures. This is all based upon slope and topography. We have serious climatic changes that occur each year. October, September, this year, January. If it wasn't for the cold, we'd probably redeclared fire season. We were just that close. It was more of, for the state, it was more of a economic issue. Because had they declared fire season, we would have to bring back more resources. We actually had aircraft on standby because we knew everybody was downsized. But we had enough dry weather where we could have redeclared fire season. In the high fire severity area, designate requirements for exterior fire control. What are our rates? Stucco, brick. What we don't do with wood siding or wood roofs anymore, or allow it in the hills for new construction. If you modify your roof and you have a wood shed roof, after you receive over 25% of modification to that structure, you have to change it to a Class A roof. Tile ceramic, that's the requirement. Okay, we didn't make this assessment district or our high fire severity. We actually have a street-by-street grid of the area that's determined as a high fire severity area. Would you guys like me to walk you through each street? All right. Okay, new code. The code focuses on making homes ignition proof, protecting them, allowing us to get a good fight. How do we do that? The requirement for residential fire sprinklers. If you build a home within the hills, you have to have a fire sprinkler system installed. Now it's, because of our adoption, now it's state code. Any home, any single or dual family home has to have fire sprinklers now. Protecting the home from the inside out. Because as I indicated earlier, a lot of fires occur from something happening inside of the structure and moving it or progressing its way outside the structure. So, building construction. These are the new requirements. We adopted Chapter 7 of the California Building Code for us. It's Chapter 47 of the California Fire Code. So what did we do? Roof assembly. As you see in that slide where the roof was on fire, we put the roofs and a Diablo fire, wildfire condition are the most vulnerable point of the house, next to glass. Because that's where stuff gets in at. That little, I think it's item on the inspection log 8, where we say clean your roof and gutters, that's what generated that requirement. So now, homes have to, as Mr. Stevens said, have to have performance design and reduce the size of the eaves, try to eliminate as much as possible anywhere where embers can become entrapped. What else? Wall assembly. You're now required to have 2 pieces of 5/8 gypsum, type X, to make your walls rated so they can last at least an hour. At least an hour. Because in a wildfire situation, fire moves very quickly through an area. It's burning the light stuff. It's when we start getting structures involved, the heavy, we call it 100-hour plus fuels, where you get the massive conflagration or the massive loss of homes within a neighborhood. Decks and sidings, also performance standards, non-combustible. Rain gutters that shall not clean out your gutters. Door ceilings. In the hills, your door has to be rated. How can you tell? You open up the door, look on the side, there should be a panel. Little label that says 3/4 hour. That gives you performance. Because once again, you want the fire to pass by. Window assembly performance. That is probably the second to an open door is the most likely source for an interior structure fire. Windows. How many of you, show of hands, tell the truth, ensure that your drapes are closed when you leave? Thank you. That gives you another 10, 15 minutes of protection just by closing the drapes. Because that radiant heat won't get in. Once again, you want the fire to pass through. We want the fire to pass through. Bit assemblies are also been changed in the code. New house, smaller venting, because that's also another source. Firebrand getting in the attic. You'd be surprised how long the firebrand will last. And you'd be surprised, okay, show of hands, where's your Christmas stuff stored in?
In the basement.
Mine's in the attic. What is that? The most lightest, wispiest piece of paper you can find is up there. So, protecting entries into the house. This is what the goal is. All right, you guys want to go to the code lesson? As I said, we adopted chapter 47. We required more fuels treatments. Blah, blah, blah. This is where the inspection program comes from. It's adopted by council each year. We're going through another code adoption in about another 8 months that says that you have to have defensible space around your home. Establishes the requirements for it. Maintain defensible space by 30 feet. It doesn't, the misunderstanding is that when we say maintain 30-foot defensible space, we're not saying you have to cut everything down. You just have to maintain a clearance. My preference is you maintain that vegetation away from your windows. Thermal point source. More law. Remove portions of trees extend within 10 feet of the chimney. Once again, another roof source. The roof is the most vulnerable part of your home. And as a reminder, reminder, you're required to have an address. This is just not just for vegetation management and wildfire. It's EMS. 80% of our calls are EMS calls. Addresses delay response. And it's very, very important. With that, any questions?
Now, there's a very specific requirement in terms of trees and chimneys, but when you talk about roofs, it's just maintained. What does that mean? That's open to interpretation by different individuals.
The roof, within our code, it says you must maintain a 10-foot horizontal clearance between roof structures. That's the code. And it's this is like I tell people. I believe. Okay, you have a house, 1 hour stucco wall, no openings. Tree's okay because you have a radius side. But if you have like there behind you, just pure glass, then you want to remove the vegetation because now you have a source for radiant and convective energy to get into your house. How many of you guys got shears behind the curtain? Those nice little lacy. I'll tell them a story. Those are burned very, 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 very fast. So drapes are the way to go.
But not the shears.
Not the shears, yes. It's like putting tissue behind your glass. Especially if over 30% of your wall is glass, give me some thermal curtains. Big, old style drapes.
So, like at this time of the year, all the lovely Japanese trees have no leaves on them or anything. In the summer, they have very green leaves that are full of water. Well, that tree's very different than a juniper. The corkscrew junipers or the juniper. I don't know if you all remember, but about 4 years ago, there was a fire out in Rossmore, started in a kitchen in the old part of Rossmore. And one of the most telling things about juniper was, so the first buildings in Rossmore, the garages were down here, they were built up above, and there were like 6 in a building, 6 units, and the third one in or something caught fire in the kitchen. And it burned the ones on either side and burned down to the garage. And 85 feet away, the juniper caught fire from the radiant heat of the flames and everything. There, at that point, there wasn't embers even. No, probably embers and radiant heat. But junipers, rosemary, coyote brush are just sitting there full of oil, waiting to get heated up. I mean, take a piece of juniper or a piece of rosemary when you have a barbecue, and just hold it over your, about that far above the coals or the whatever. You will see what happens to it. You will not want that to be underneath your windows or next to your house.
Okay, can we slide this way so we can all use the microphone? I would like to make a request, even though these vegetation issues are important, that's a whole meeting right there. So let's try and concentrate on the structures. And I don't think anybody is actually building a house here. So we'll try to work, if we can, with the houses as they exist and tips that you can still do to prevent the embers from coming. Yes? It's behind you, excuse me.
I purposely did not put drapes up because I thought they were flammable. So this is new information, please, and I can do it. That's no problem. But I'm wondering if are there materials under the fabric? Are lines preferable? Are there, especially when you have a deck? We've got these sliding glass doors, and they look out over at the trees. And what is my material that I should put, interior or exterior, to take care of this radiant?
Okay, the question was, are drapes really desirable and what window coverings would be desirable? I know there are some non-flammable drapes. One of the techniques is to move them away from the windows as soon as the fire approaches, maybe shutters. You want to comment on that?
the new thermal drapes that are out there are good. I mean, it's not like you're putting concrete, but you're trying to forge your house some minimal protection till the fire front passes. Now, to be 100% honest with you, there are some fires out there that we're not going to be able to stop. The firestorm was a perfect storm as far as fire went. So what we're trying to do is that 85 to 90% of the average fires that we have, making them all survivable, because you're allowing us the opportunity, the chance to come here and try to get the fire out.
The other thing to think about is natural fibers, wool, well, you're not gonna put wool up on the curtains, cotton, canvas, heavy stuff is way slower to catch fire than nylon. I mean, if you're running away in a fire, you do not want polar fleece on you, you know. So the flimsy nylon and man-made fibers melt. So they end up being no protection at all. But Roman shades do a really, really good job because they're heavy, and I don't know, they call them duets or something, where there's air in between the two layers of the thing. And whether you have if you have double pane windows, it's way less important than if you have single pane. I'm in an old house. I have single pane windows. I need heavy drapes, which is cheaper than new windows.
May I make a suggestion? The handout you have, it's organized in 4 categories: the top, the wall, the overhangs, and the attached. And we need some of those things are bold-faced. There are some techniques. I'd like to just spin through the things on top of the house. The chimneys is pretty obvious. Spark arresters, a chimney sweep if you're using it, and you can use a vigorous 10 or 15-minute burn once in a while to burn off some of the stuff. Any panel comments on that?
And keep your damper closed when you're not using it.
Right. As far as skylights go, this is something I know we tend to forget about. On the hot days, with people that have skylights that open, that's the exact day that they leave them open, and they're not screened often, and they're not going to be there when the fire comes. You've lost the protection, and your house is gone. You have to. I'll get over to when we get to windows, we can talk about some of the things about skylights. I think the plastic ones, I guess, are not desirable. Any comments on that, Leroy? Is the materials?
No, we don't approve those anymore. They have to be rated because the roof facility has to be rated in order for it to qualify as a Class A roof.
I had a question about the chimney.
Chimney, yes.
I've got 2 chimneys, one from my fireplace and one which is really just the exhaust from the furnace. Does that also have to be 10 feet from trees and stuff?
That's correct.
Okay. The question was, do the furnace vents also have to be 10 feet? Trees, brush be 10 feet away, and the answer was yes. More on chimneys or skylights? Yes.
It's not the roof, it's supposed to.
We're coming to that.
Chimney question, we have log sets. So they're artificial logs that's burning gas. And the companies who install them, especially in the vented chimneys, want you to keep the vent open when you're using it. And because a lot of people forget, they actually put little locks to keep it permanently open. But I'm getting the idea from you that, in fact, it ought to be closed when we're not.
I think the point is the embers that go both ways. Is that-
Yeah, I mean, if you have an open chimney without a cap on it, now, I think we probably all have both caps and spark arresters, so it's probably not an issue, because we've been enforcing it with code. But if the stuff is blowing around, it's going to go down the chimney if the chimney's up. So you don't want open vents there. And it's very different with the gas fire, I think, as far as what you need to do with maintenance. But if you've got a wood burning fire, When you're not using it, close the vent.
Yeah, but we have a gas burning, so
It's
you.
different. You've got
Okay.
to count.
To get to the roofs, AAA, of course, most of the roofs are already in place. I don't know if there's anybody in this group that has questions about the type of the roof. A couple key points are if you have a tile roof, make sure you have bird stoppers, because birds get in there and there's nothing like a nest to start a fire, as any Boy Scout knows. Those have to be screened and birds pull them out and make their nests in there. The other issue about the roofs I don't think most people are aware of is anywhere you have an interface of the roof with siding, that's a place that's often vulnerable because the embers go where the leaves go. And you get all these nooks and crannies in the roof. And I just drove over there here through the Norfolk Buckingham area as I came back from a drive getting my battery geared up. And I'm just amazed at how many nooks and crannies there are in the houses. And the embers will land in there just like the leaves do. So that's an intersection that you really got to be careful about. And the importance, not just of getting the pine needles and everything out of the gutters, but getting them out of those nooks and crannies or screening them off with 8-inch metal screening, which you can get down at Orchard Supply. To protect it, and this also goes for the fascia, which is you get the roof and the gutter, and then there's this little piece of wood that often rots a little bit, which is also not good, and any gaps in the roof. So it's not just the roof, it's all those corners that it can ignite the roof. Any comments more on the roof or questions or corners? Yeah.
One quick tip, I got it from this person right here. The next time the weatherman says it's safe, offshore flow, the high exists over the state of California, over Nevada. While the winds are blowing, go outside, throw up some leaves, and see where they go. And that's where you start protecting your home from. Because again, that's where the embers are going to go. So that's where you want to focus your protection. It's very easy, very simple to do. So it goes back to the great.
Russell? The new foam roofs, how much, like embers, will that be protected?
Question is how effective are foam roofs?
Yeah. They still have to meet the Class A rating over an hour.
Over now? Yeah.
That's correct.
Many of us have rebuilt our homes, it's been 18, 20 years. It sounds like, you were saying sometimes things get rotten. What do you suggest in terms of having an inspection? Maybe just have somebody make sure our roofs are in good shape. Because I'm not necessarily in my local area, but you have it done every 5 years or 10 years or still almost 20 years. Maybe we should have an inspection. Or, hire somebody to inspect it. Okay.
While you're up there cleaning out that gutter, which you're all going to do, that's the best time to inspect. And when in doubt, that's when I'm bringing a professional inspector.
I think a lot of roofing companies will come out and give you an inspection without a charge, tell you, oh, you got 6 years left on this roof, or give you an assessment of what it is. I mean, it doesn't hurt to get a bid on what it would cost to replace it. And once you get outside this area, there's still places around, and you may have friends that still have wood-shake roofs. And you're saying, well, they're 40-year roofs, and the fire was 20 years ago, and I'm not going to replace it. But I think you're right. Every 5 or 6 years, get somebody up there and take a look at it.
Another issue has to do with gutters. A lot of the gutters are very high and almost impossible to reach. And perhaps a question for Leroy here or so forth, this idea about getting gutter guards, which keep the leaves from getting in there in the first place. There's some sort of mesh or something like that would help. And also I have a note I found somewhere, but I don't know what it means. Something about the lower gutters fed by tiles are supposed to be cleaned out, particularly. I don't know why that is. So we can take answers and take questions.
Well, I have a question, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
But I was wondering if there's a difference in terms of how you classify a roof as Class A, if it's a flat roof versus
if you get a roofer, no decent roofer would do anything but put a Class A roof up here. They will come out and say, I mean, I used to have a tar and gravel roof on my house, which is a 7% slope. You can't do that anymore here. You have to, there are Class A assemblies for flat roofs. Way less good than, I mean, the steeper the pitch, the better it is. The stuff just rolls right off, you know, but generally speaking, you can't put a whole new roof on a flat roof house, so.
Yes, to answer your question, it's the composition of the material that determines the classification of the roof itself.
You
Yes,
can
it's-
figure it out yourself.
Yes, it has to be certified by the state park marshal that this type of composition of tar paper, this amount of gravel will determine the classification. And it has to be that we will not get a building permit if the roofer does not install it. With that, because they have to submit documents showing what they're installing.
Did any house built after the firestorm in the fire area have a Class A roof?
Yes.
Okay, the next issue on vents and soffits, which are the eaves, I think is something major. It's something that I worry about extremely up at our Taylor Highlands because we have these eaves that stick way out from the house. Many of the builders got carried away with their drill and drilled these holes all through the fascia for ventilation in the roof. Swallows can get in there, pull out, if there is wire, pull it out and make a nice nest, which is about the worst. Like I say, it's a guaranteed way of getting a fire into your roof. As far as I can tell, many of these holes are not even colored with mesh. So about the vents, there are roof vents and then there are ridge vents, which tend to suck the wind up and so the air goes out, and of course they are important so you don't get water problems, which is our other huge problem up here with all the water damage. And then the fascia, which is that flat piece below the gutter, somebody wants to correct me. But the main thing is these eaves, and I know in my house, which is typical of every house I've seen up at Hiller Highlands, you have the roof sticking out here, you have this 2 by 1.5 by 6 or something like that, and then you have bare plywood above it. And the problem with it is, when the fire comes, the walls are pretty resistant, so the fire gets deflected underneath, right up into that area. And unfortunately, we're left with the construction we have. What's recommended is that those areas be boxed in with the fireproof material and so forth and so on. Good luck, it's like rebuilding your house. And that some sort of metal or fiberglass be used there. The recommendation for the mesh change varies from 1/4 inch. At Tahoe, it's 1/8 inch. And I know Steve Coral, so I tried to get here tonight. He's actually no longer based in the area. He was a PhD in materials and so forth, and he recommends a 1/8 inch wire mesh, as long as you don't coat it with so much paint that you get no ventilation. But I think questions about that area, this is the unrecognized area. Like I said, I see it as these holes in all the houses are a major problem, and these uncovered soffits, I think, is our major vulnerability up here at least. Any comments on that or questions? I don't know how the homes got through this before Leroy's time, how they were not built to code, because you're not supposed to have those things sticking way out.
For my time.
Right. Okay, let's go to the wall. And here, windows in particular, especially on the first floor, those facing a likely fire, in our case, it's in the northeast. The recommendation is double pane and tempered. They hold up better. They're less likely to break or be broken by a flying firebrand. They need to be flashed to prevent rot. Of course, that's a major problem up here with the winds we get year-round. Rot, a word about rot, you'll hear this again. Decayed wood has a lower burning temperature and is more vulnerable to fire. So decayed wood is a great place for an ember to get a fire started. You know, you can, if it's a small amount, you can chisel out and fill it or something, obviously. One thing is roll down shutters. I actually have a few in my house. I used it to try to stop the rain that was coming in. That wasn't where, the leak, that wasn't what was doing it, but I've left it. I have a question about awnings. I've seen no criteria for those. As far as screens go, the recommendation, I understand, is you have bronze or this plastic club or something they call it, like, which is more resistant. The screens can reduce the heat on the window. Of course, that doesn't help in your sliding doors too much by something like a third. It reduces the radiant heat a little bit. So having the screens closed is helpful, and it can help bigger fire brands from actually hitting the window. Of course, if you had the luxury, you could have pre-fit 3/4 inch plywood. I think that's not very practical up here. So, Leroy, do you have anything to add to those comments or disagreements, or and we can take questions on that too. The fit of the smaller the window is, the less vulnerable it is. The bigger one is more vulnerable. We have all these sliding doors, which of course this is a major vulnerability. And part of the trouble with the windows too is should you get a flame like from brush, which we're not talking about yet, but this is why tree limbs and so forth that are close to the house, that flame, a direct flame gets in them. That can break your window and you're finished. Okay. No questions. I think we've covered drapes and shutters. And moving into siding. As far as the siding, one of the things is looking for gaps and like laps, or where the siding bends a little bit, like vinyl is notorious for that. It also melts from the heat conduction and falls off your house. And one of the things I found, particularly up at my place in Hiller Highlands, is the underside of the siding, which was quite resistant, was just cut raw. So, and you look down at the bottom where you have about 6 inches down to the ground, and that's where the leaves collect. So it's a perfect place for fire to go. And also, we got carried away with the mulch, and we're putting the mulch right up to the side of the house. Mulch dries out and it burns. And we can get into stories about that when we're talking about the non-existent zone. So it's now raked a good 12 inches away. Even on, there are different builders for each house, going around and filling the edge of the stucco. Some of it was sealed, and some of it was just flat, unsealed at the bottom. So this, you can do everything you want, and the wall is solid, but it either deflects it upward, or you get the embers underneath the siding, and that can start the house on fire. What I did is I put 8-inch mesh around, and I had a few people that did it. Basically, I did well, we won't get into that. So I think the question on the siding, and then the gaps, and on the siding, wherever you have corners, the corners of the doors, the trim, there are often little gaps in there. These are places that really you have to pay attention to, so that one ember that gets in there and smolders and starts your house burning. This is really important to take care of. Questions on siding? Yes.
Our house was inspected by our insurance company a couple years ago. They actually canceled us because of the location of where we live, this fire zone. And then they wanted us to come back after a year. They had a guy come by and do an inspection who was a former fireman. And he recommended the house itself is one siding, and we would yearly or every 2 years this was clear, not anything like need to change the color of the wood itself, just to protect the wood. And he suggested something that could be added to whatever is applied to the siding to decrease the vulnerability of the wood. And actually, the guy that did it agreed with it. Went ahead and got this, whatever was needed to give us that added protection. He even brought us a piece of the wood siding and had put a blue torch, to one part of it that wasn't treated and one part that was, to show the difference in vulnerability. And it was quite amazing. And so that's what we do now is, if we're going to have it treated, we have that added to it.
The question was about having a protective coating. You can apply every few years for wood siding. Do you have any no knowledge about it?
There is a company up in Sonora called Armstrong, but not Armstrong Painting, that comes around and paints your house, that has had very good success, and I'm not, advertising for them, but they were at the 20th anniversary thing with very impressive looking things. They have stuff that you can put on decks, that just is a clear thing you put on your deck, and then they have various kinds of stain or clear things to put on the vertical part of your house. I only have one brochure, but anybody that's interested, on the back are pictures of different fires they built on things without. There's another company called Safer Wood, I think, that produces wood if you're doing a new deck, that it's treated beforehand. But, but there now are, there is paint and stain that's available that's more fireproof than it used to be.
The substance,
Yeah.
the substance you're talking about is called intumescent paint. And what it does, it provides a rating for various materials. Next time you're in a high-rise building and you see the ink stress bars, they are coated with this paint. That's how they achieve their rating. And one company, it's called FF88. I'm not an endorser for it, but I actually went to Seattle for them to do their rating test, and it survived an hour. We actually also went to San Francisco. We burned an outhouse out in Toronto State Park, nothing against the Niners. And we had two outhouses. One was coated with this paint, the other one wasn't, and it survived, even though the house was right next to the house that was burning. So it does work. These new materials that are coming out.
And also, what you put on the siding makes a drug. If you, like I was driving around today, I saw a house on Hiller Drive here, and there was a lattice work, like battens, right between the two windows with a planter box next to it. Well, this lattice work of battens, the strips, is a wonderful place for embers to get caught. And like a Tudor style, you have all the wood strips on it. You're just sort of asking for it. Yes, you got a question over here?
How much more resistant is stucco than wood?
Stucco versus wood, my understanding is you need a certain thickness of it. You need about 3 layers.
Of stucco?
I'm not a builder.
It's a magnitude higher than wood.
A magnitude higher than wood. Okay. All right, we can move on to decayed wood. I sort of covered that, but particularly the corners of windsills and the deck. You can get decayed wood on that. My neighbor has it. And we have, like I said, we have everybody up there has problems with dry rot in my experience with southwest winds. From that, I'd like to go to the overhangs. And this is a big issue. Overhangs are anything that hangs outside the wall. You may have a bay window. You've got the area underneath it you've got to worry about. You've got decks. You've got porches. And these are a major vulnerability. I won't cover the vegetation that goes around it, but one of the things is what do you put on those decks? I know my deck has these little cracks in it, and I've seen pictures of, like Frank Beal showed, you can just see all the ember little birds right in the cracks. And particularly where the deck attaches to the house. Often it's a very imperfect joint, and it's a perfect place for the embers to come. I had to have mine treated. What you use on the deck is another issue. I know one of their recommendations is 2x6 hard redwood, which is extremely heavy, hard to cut, but it's one way of doing it. Underneath the deck, of course, is extremely important. You can use a 1/8 inch screen or actually have it enclosed, like with a stucco material, something like that. Maybe beveled, something like that. The underneath area is a risk. And then you can get around some of the problems of that getting mildewed or something underneath by having the deck tilted a little bit so the water drains off. Again, I'm not a builder, but the point is, before we get to what you put on the deck or porch, the connections to the house, what it's made out of, makes a huge difference. Any questions or comments on that?
And I think part of what matters is how high the deck is. I mean, if it starts 20 feet in the air, it's a different risk than if it's 2 or 3 feet. If it's 2 or 3 feet off the ground, you better believe it's going to accumulate leaves and all the stuff that's blowing around before the fire and then the embers. And so you really, they call it skirting the deck. If you've got a deck that's probably less than 7 feet off the ground, you probably should think seriously about skirting it.
Sue?
What's the difference between wood and tracks? Is one better than the other? Tracks, okay. Plastic.
What's the difference between wood and Trex and some of the other materials?
Not all tracks are created equally.
What she's saying.
Yeah, there's some that's, the newer stuff, the high-end newer stuff is pretty close to wood.
Yes.
Ipe, the new Brazilian hardwood, is probably even more resistant than redwood, according to my checking things out, because it's really, really dense. And so you can get by with a thinner, you don't need a 2-inch thick, you can go by with 1 1/4 inches or something. But the old Trex, you can melt through them with a charcoal briquette, and the old ones decay and get all flaky and stuff. If you're looking at Trex, don't economize too much, I think, is in the fire area.
Decks aren't bad. It's what we do with our decks that make them bad. The lattice under them, storage of material under them, paint cans. The deck is the best place to hide stuff. And that's what makes decks bad. Because normally they will last for a few minutes within a fire. Minimal of them. Even a very poor deck will last at least 30 minutes before it gets fully involved. It's all the stuff that we add to the, what we call a fire load, that makes things bad.
And some of the examples are baskets of dried flowers, for example. You can get much more flammable than that. The baskets themselves, some lovely woven baskets I've seen with dead sticks, very artistic, but it's just asking for a fire made to look like animals, something like that. And one of the deck furniture too. In fact, one of the recommendations I've seen, if you have time, bring your deck furniture inside the house. Maybe take the drapes away from the window too, that you remember to close. But there are some things you can do. This gets into another issue too, and the whole question about barbecues. I think charcoal barbecues are illegal in the hills, aren't they? Is that no? Okay. They probably should be though, because when you do those things, when you douse the fire, if you douse the fire in water or something, you can just see all the sparkles coming out. So charcoal barbecues, you got to be extremely careful with. Gas barbecues with a propane tank, obviously you can't get the propane tank very far away from the house, but one caveat is the cover for the gas barbecue. I don't know if any of you know Tammy Amar, who has this house up here at the top of Wind Canyon, and she was up there, and the firemen came, and her house was doing all right, but they looked outside at the deck, and that cover for the barbecue is made out of a vinyl material, something like that, and that gets hot, and it burns extremely hot, and the firemen popped over there and put it out. But one thing you would want to do in that case is get that cover off of that and put it inside your house, because if it burns there, it doesn't make much difference, but it can burn extremely hot and start a fire. And then the question of attached hoses. It's certainly a wise thing to have hoses attached so someone else can use them on your house if they need you. You can use them yourself. And I know when we had the 2008 fire that got started, a cigarette down on Tunnel Road and burned up and actually scorched a few of our houses. One of our homeowners was out there watering the deck from above, and the fireman says, no, you want to get underneath and water it up. Because what happens is again, just like the eaves, the fire hits the side of the house and then goes up, and the underside of the deck is what can be particularly vulnerable. I don't know if you have some additions. Any questions on that? Any questions on that column before we go to attached? Okay, the attachment, garages tend to be a forgotten issue in protecting your house. One of the things, if it's a roll-down door, make sure that it's a snug fit at the bottom, because the embers can just blow in there, and we have all kinds of flammable stuff in our garages. Even weather stripping the bottom, so you have a tight fit. As far as the top, having a 2x4 trim for the top gap. Gaps in the garage are a problem. In the utility closet doors, I know where I live, all our utility closet doors are made out of plywood, which often doesn't fit very well, and here you have all this fireproof siding, and you have a loose utility door that's got big gaps around it, and it's open part of the time. A huge thing. And then there are also windows and vents in the garage, which tend not to be treated as seriously as windows and vents in the rest of the house, but they're just as vulnerable. And by far, the most important thing is to close your garage door when you leave. In the Angora fire that was up in South Tahoe, when I toured that area and spent several hours looking at it, and several of the houses burned because they left in such a hurry they forgot to close the garage door. And while we're on garage doors, and this gets into what we'll talk about when we talk about preparing to leave the house, evacuation, and so forth, is unlock it and disconnect the automatic opener so someone can help out, get in from the outside, something like that. Also for yourself, because when the power goes, you have to know how to get out of there. So unlock it, disconnect it, and the gas turn off is key. This helps also for the earthquake situation, of course, is having an automatic gas turn off, and you can turn it off yourself. If you're not there to do it. Most plumbers can take care of this for you. A couple $100 perhaps. Any questions on garages or additional comments?
Just, if you have to replace your garage door, which people have to do about every 20-some years, look at the steel ones. They're cheaper, they're lighter weight, and they're fire resistant compared to a solid wooden door or the plywood, composition doors are really not a good idea in this area.
Firewood is self-explanatory, but I still know of houses up here that have firewood and a lattice thing underneath their steps. The foundation vents, same issue, an 1/8" metal screen, and keep them clean too, because if the screen gets all, either you use heavy paint on it or a lot of debris blocking it, then isn't going to do you much good. I talked about attached hoses. Now, as far as, before fences and gates, anything else?
Yeah. One interesting tip about foundation vents, you really should, after the winter every year, walk them. Because what happens to them besides being a risk for fire, that's how the rats and the mice get in your house. They get little tiny holes, they break the corner end, and that's how they get in. And so you're killing two rats with one ants. I don't know how to keep them, I don't know how to keep them out.
I want to spend a lot of time on fences and gates, because this is, again, an overlooked problem. I know it's a huge problem where I live. A lot of people have these, where they're townhouses, they have privacy fences or something like that. The wood gets old, it deteriorates, they connect directly to the house, which is a big no-no. The fences or the gates. And also a couple of hints there. One is you don't want your sprinklers hitting that wood because that gives you the rot at the bottom of the fence, which, as I've already mentioned, makes it decidedly more vulnerable. The recommendation is that be at least 1.5 inches thickness, and a lot of them have open and shut so the air can get between, which again has all these places, perfect places for embers to lodge, and they just burn on the fence and go up there. A big issue I fought up here, we have a continuous fence running past 12 houses, which just makes me shudder. You can have a wooden frame with a wire mesh would be better, and Barbara will comment on some other advantages about that, I'm sure. So a wire mesh and maintained vines, not dry ones, which would be less flammable than the wood. And then where it attaches to the home, you ideally should have metal or masonry or stucco instead of a wood-to-wood interface with that junction there. And again, the pictures I showed Frank Beals from in Southern California, you could just see how that fire got to the house. So you want to tell your fence story?
Oh, and the other good reason to rethink your fence is what's good for fire prevention. Also is good for security. I've actually taken all my fences down. And I started off by replacing the gate that attached to the garage and the fence, and replaced that with metal. And then I finally took all the fences down. But it's good security. The police can see in, your neighbors can see in. And what appears, you may want privacy, but I don't want privacy for the burglars. And I don't want privacy for the fire that starts in my house. And so, of course, I grew up in an area where people didn't have fences between yards. So it looks okay to me. It drives my neighbors crazy that I don't have a fence. But living here in the hills, I think we have to rethink some of these things. And so it's not a bad idea if you have gates in the fence that they're not wood. That's one step you can do first. So you've got a stoppage of the fire. If the fire starts out here and it burns and burns and then it gets to the wooden gate, the metal gate, it's not going to keep going. You'll see as you drive through some of the new subdivisions or on the freeway, that they put stucco panels every so often in some of these, in some fences too, or wire, heavy wire, they call it hot wire, to act as a brake, so that it doesn't just sit and smolder and smolder and smolder and smolder and suddenly get the house.
There's some, Barbara's right, there's some also positive effect by doing good vegetation management. I'll give you an example. We worked with this community, Sun Kids, on the east end of town, that's off 73rd, and they were having problems with burglary. So we went in and we convinced them to do vegetation management because they had so much overgrowth. Nothing drastic because they wanted their privacy. We lifted up 6 feet so you can see, and we also can see a measurable drop in the crime in that area just by doing vegetation management. So I really think twice about the hedges. Another thing, when I drive through here and I see the ones where you got lattice, you get a nice vine going up. You know what I call them? I call that a fuse. A fuse.
A fuse, yeah.
Because, think about it, because it's upstairs, that's the last area you're ever worried about securing because you can't think anybody can get up there, correct? But in a fire, that fuse is going to go to the most vulnerable point, where your mattress, where your bedding, fancy cologne, or fruit, is at. And that's where you get the fire that starts. How did the fire start upstairs as opposed to downstairs? We're coming to get you guys with the vines.
Okay, also, the junk that gets put next to the walls. We have 100 homeowners in our phase. I did a courtesy fire inspection of the structures for which I was accused of being Hitlerian, a peeping Tom. I peeped over the walls and so forth. But the debris that is up against those fences, you might as well have it up against your kitchen door or something like that, because all that stuff gets stored in that corner, and that is a problem. That's next to our problem with the eaves up here. I think that's our second biggest problem in our homeowners association, is these wooden fences all over the place, attached to walls and sometimes continuous, let alone the fact that everything is in a pod. So when the first house goes, basically we all Questions, we can maybe talk about some of the close-in vegetation issues, but are there any other purely structural questions or comments anyone wants to have? Some of these fixes would be extremely expensive. Your house is already built. Most of them are pretty cheap, and they can make a difference. Nothing is going to make your home fireproof that you want to live into. Cigarettes, of course, smoking, all this kind of thing is another thing in a high wind situation. Okay, I think the key points, because we've gone an hour and a half here, so I don't want to make people feel they have to stay. But I think some of the important points about vegetation here is how close it is to windows. Because the wall is pretty resistant, but the window doesn't take much to break. So that's a big issue about branches, trees, bushes being, within 18 inches, 3 feet, something like that, the window. You're asking for trouble. Another issue is what's above that bush or whatever it is. You don't want to have the stuff under a deck. And we had a major rehaul up at our area where all this rosemary that was planted everywhere. And the stuff got a lot of dry wood, and here we got a deck sitting out of there, and the flame length is, 3 times higher than the bush, twice, something like that. I figured it out, so everything's going to burn. We had to take out all that rosemary. It's a landscaper's favorite plant. Fortunately, we didn't have juniper. But these things underneath decks, close in, underneath the balcony, underneath what do you call the window, San Francisco? Bay window, excuse me. All these things, or even what's up on your planter on the deck up above, which is getting close to the roof line. What's there is, that's where the vegetation becomes particularly important, and there is no fireproof mulch. It burns. Examples at the meeting I went to, they had all this no smoking in the building thing, which was great, and they were very good on putting mulch and so forth, but they came out of the office building, would flick their cigarettes into mulch, which is the best way to get it to burn, and nobody died from cigarettes, but the whole office burned down. And this is a problem. The mulch burns. And if you have big piles of it, and get spontaneous combustion. Stone, pebbles, all that kind of stuff. If it's watered mulch, that's one thing, but I see it dried out all over the area. And it can be a fuel. Yes?
In terms of mulch, the bigger the chip, the longer it takes to ignite. And pea gravel, I put pea gravel down, and that works better than organic mulch in terms of the health of the plant. My plants actually did better with pea gravel as a mulch than it did with organic mulch.
The speaker was saying that the bigger the individual piece of mulch, the less ignition possibility, and also pea gravel works very well and so forth, and then you don't have any, that stuff doesn't burn.
There's that lava rock. There's other rocky things, lava rock. I recently heard a presentation by someone from Australia saying mulch is the most overrated thing. It doesn't make sense in our climate to use it because it doesn't work well for the plants that you think it does. I mean, people use it decoratively, but then you have a choice. Then you can use non-flammable stuff, rocks, gravel. But what mulch does is encourage the roots to grow close to the surface and not deep. And if the plant needs that much water, it doesn't belong here, was his conclusion. The Australian was quite a big commercial garden.
Yes.
Are compost piles a risk?
Yes, we generate heat. Like, you don't turn it.
But some people.
Compost piles, yeah. Yeah, spontaneous generation. Yes?
Does the fire department, if they see rotted wood on a house, do things when you go around to do the plan, do you look at that also, or?
I'm sorry, your question is what's the fire department look at the structure when they're doing their inspections? I think I know the answer to that.
Yes and no. nice bureaucratic answer. We're looking for more plans. I mean, if the structure looks like it's in disrepair, we'll call the building department. But, no, we're looking mainly for potential fire sources.
Yeah, this is one of the problems I've had in trying, a homeowner will say, oh gee, I passed inspection, I'm fine. But they have structural problems or stuff under the deck, and unfortunately, this is not something the inspections are worked toward and so forth because
Yeah.
of various things. It's just the way the situation is. I've been trying to change this, but we have problems. I think a major part here is, again, this is really the homeowner's responsibility, but I hate to see people say get the impression that they're safe when these things are going on. That's just something we're working on. Yes, Fred?
In terms of home composting, home compost piles will never generate the kind of heat to combust. You just can't, at home you can't do it. And if you're composting correctly, you should be keeping the pile moist. So,
Properly done home compost shouldn't be a problem, it's the statement. Yes?
If the rosemary is such a problem, why is it not noted on the inspection? Because we are just absolutely covered by it.
There are no rules in California on specific species that are not acceptable for landscaping. And one of the problems with inspections is you can only inspect and hold people to what the law is, which is not necessarily what we might choose. I mean, in an ideal world, we want somebody to come and coach us through the right thing to do. But 22,000 homes in the wildfire prevention district, you're not going to get 22,000 people that agree that. So you can only inspect and hold people to what the law is. Logic said, and if you talk to your fire insurance provider, they will probably tell you get rid of the thyme and rosemary. Same goes, there's a lot of, anything that smells really good probably has a lot of oil in it.
Yeah, I hope to, I will have Carol Rice at our next meeting who will talk specifically to this issue, the characteristics you want to watch for. Rosemary is certainly one, and basically anything they planted around my house after the fire is something you don't want to plant. Rosemary is notorious. Fortunately, there was no juniper. I know, I think in your face, Fred, they planted ceanothus all over the place. Native goes well and so forth. That stuff dies off. It's extremely difficult to get that. Even with chainsaws, it's prickly and everything. So natives aren't necessarily good either. It depends on what you've got. But she gets into the aromatic things, the things that fine small leaves are part of it. There's another book out about fire-safe landscaping, and their whole point was properly maintained. Meaning you don't have dead wood in it, you prune it back and so forth and so on, and you don't have it right next to the house, blah, 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 this kind of stuff. We even had prostate backroots, cattle push planted all over the place, which is horrible to get rid of, extremely flammable. Manzanita. We've got you look up and down Hiller Drive, we've got a whole line of manzanita.
But things that are good, the lily of the valley, the pretty flowers, they'll die in a fire, but they're not going to light other things on fire.
Yeah, the big thing we had all the way in the freeways and what the heck's that stuff, all the flowering stuff they had all over the California freeways. Oleanders all over the place, and it's spoiling. To say nothing of some of the choices in trees. It's okay. So hopefully you're certainly invited to the May 10th meeting, which will get into the non-emission zone, and I think we can talk about some of the evacuation things and so forth too, and take it from there. Thank you very much for
I
coming.
do have brochures that I just found this afternoon and couldn't get more on some products if you're in the mood for rehabbing anything, including some of the examples of the vents, and they're not expensive. They're like $8 or $10 a vent. I mean, for under $100, you can do a lot of good.
And I'll be glad to email copies of some of these suggestions to those blind carbon copies. Your name doesn't go all over the place. And Very well.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Ah,